Milo was in Berlin today to give a speech at a blogger conference. They invited 80 people. One of them is David Berger, who is the head of a new organization that is supposed to give us some legal backing and some organizational help. The conference was said to be about helping us and finding some means for us to help each other with our activity. Steve Bannon gave a speech at the event. I was not there, obviously, but maybe I will be in future when my channel attracts more viewers. And newspaper Tagesspiegel, which is owned by the publisher that also issues my favorite uber-leftist paper titled Ultra Right-Wing Women Nemesis Yiannopoulos starring guest at AfD. And it's quite interesting because I will go with you through the criticism of the right-wing media, and a lot of it is, we are scaremongering and we are just painting things in a certain light and we are not objective and so on and so on. But they come up with headlines like ultra right-wing women nemesis Yiannopoulos starring guest at AfD, which they have already demonized so much that it is a scare factor in itself. Tide, which also belongs to the same publisher as Tagesspiegel, as I mentioned, tried everything to get AfD out of their room. They ask everybody whether the rooms assigned to the party can be used for non-parliamentarian work-related issues. Now, one must know that, I think it is completely stupid that the parliament or that the taxpayer should provide rooms for parties to use. I believe in the separation of parties and state. It should be very obvious that the state should not pay anything for parties. But, of course, as always, Germany is different. And every party has a room in the parliamentarian building that they can use for their own purposes. It's called a Fraktionsraum. And the said conference was supposed to be held, or was actually held, in the AfD Fraktionsraum. Now, the Zeit actually asked everybody, including the Federal Court of Audit, whether it is okay to use this public property to host an event for private bloggers, independent media. If you want to be independent, you do not want to give them something that is taxpayer funded or something that is from a specific party, right? I get it. Well, but I'm against such rooms. And if you make that argument, then of course you can allow any rooms to any parties, because there will always be some non-parliamentarian work-related stuff in it. But Zeit just singled out the conservatives to go after this, and of course it is politically motivated to just do something against the event to stop Milo from speaking. That is their motivation. It is not about separation of interests from bloggers, parties, and the government. They have explained the problem with this in such a strange manner that I actually had to ask what they mean. First, I had to quote them, and I will read out a translation of the section that I quoted to you so that you can follow what I was asking. On the fringes of a group meeting on Tuesday came up the fear meaning the use of the public property, could soon gain the interest of the Federal Court of Audit, which checks the responsible handling of taxpayers' money in accordance with the legal statutes for representatives. It has been stated that there will be a clearer regulation in the future, and this is a direct quote, that there will be a clearer regulation in the future. Zeit Online learned from the meeting, which was said to be turbulent. Now, this is very unclear. I have no idea who made this direct quote, for example, and it isn't. They suggest that it could be from the meeting itself, from the AfD meeting, or the type of the quote or what they refer to makes it look like the Federal Court of Audit also had a meeting, and they got that quote from some authority that couldn't say there will be future rules and so on. So it wasn't really clear what meeting they were attending and or if they attended any meeting at all, if they were there. So I wrote the following questions. Did the above fears come up on the fringes of the meeting or from within the meeting? Did Zeit Online learn from the meeting or from a participant of the meeting that there would be clear rules? Of course, I respect source protection, but the quote can neither be assigned roughly to an organization or a person or even a meeting. Was somebody at the AFD parliamentary group meeting saying that there would be rooms, that there would be clear rules on the allocation of rooms in the future? How can they know that? Which meeting was said to have been turbulent? If you've learned something from the meeting or from the session, you surely know whether things were turbulent or not. What variable costs arise using the room which the Federal Court of Audit could examine? Will the heating usually be turned off at the time of the day or something of that manner? As you would expect, I did actually receive no answer, and this is I wrote the email the day before yesterday, so they had plenty of time to answer, and of course they did not. I'm not sure if it is the Milo event itself or the upcoming EU election, but for some reason the media felt an urge to talk about alternative media right now, and because there was no current event more important than the the everyday stuff that they could usually shed a light on, but they prefer to stay silent, so not to make us famous or known. So they now decided to talk about us and have created an event on their own to have a reason to do so. The event they created is a report or a study by a social media analysis company called Alto. NDR, WDR are media partners of Alto for the EU election. That's how they phrased it, which is very suspicious. I actually looked into this a bit, and George Soros is funding it, and also Mozilla Foundation, your Firefox browser, is giving money to this Alto social media analysis report. I go with you through a number of these articles to show you how they demonize us and how they can avert the attention of your average German citizen from looking into the things on their own and to find other sources than their own writing. My first example is from Tagesschau. Tagesschau used to be the most respected news show on German television. It used to be the most watched news show. Also, it is a public broadcast show, and they also have a website now. And on that website, they wrote as a teaser, portals, some of which deliberately spread false reports, often achieve a greater reach in the social networks than news sites. Behind this is a strategy. Is classical journalism in danger? I have to go through this teaser step by step to speak about the propaganda tactics that we are now facing these days. One is that they speak about they use the black sheep example to smear the entire group. Of course, this is also what conservatives are usually alleged to do, But there is something like statistics. You are allowed to generalize, but then the generalization really must be founded on actual statistics. There must be some significance to what you say. So if they start the article, even the teaser, with some people say something deliberately false. Yeah, sure, the internet is big and wide. Some people do something. Some people are recording child pornography, and some people are selling drugs online, and so on. Yes, some people are doing bad stuff. But that is statistics. The majority of news portals or bloggers or private bloggers are not deliberately putting out false information. They try their best to actually speak the truth, or as they see it. It is more that those who are close to power have all incentives to betray the audience. There's this panic mode. Of course, we are also told that conservatives always play with fear because we are all totalitarian and blah blah blah. But in reality, it is more the left than the right. Statistics more the left than the right that plays with fear, and what they do is using words like "is journalism in danger," and also creator reach is seen as a threat, and then the mainstream news sites, they are just referred to as news sites. So there's no deliberation. It's just the news sites, the good ones, their stuff, versus bad, dangerous Milo. Who the article then starts with. Right-wing groups are increasingly creating their own journalistic publicity on the internet by massively distributing journalistically questionable blogs and portals. Now, this is another thing that I see all the time as a propaganda strategy, and I've mentioned it in my video about the EU candidates for the head of the commission. Leftists very often, statistically very often, throw out just accusations without giving an explanation why, not why, but what exactly they accuse their victims of. I mean, of course, there are journalistically questionable blogs, obviously, but if you throw out that accusation, you somehow have to give examples and tell how that is usually the case with many blogs and so on. But they don't bother. They just say it is all rubbish. That's their approach. They throw out an accusation that's critical theory, and then they just brush it aside and leave the unaware reader alone with their propaganda and see the effects unfold. And then they go into the panic mode. They mention this said report and go into the findings. Among the 15 most frequently shared pages in the 3-month observation period are pages like Journalistenwatch, Einblick, Anonymous News, or Epoch Times. In addition to classic news sites like Die Welt, tagesschau.de, and Spiegel Online. Now, the news sites they are demonizing include Tischis Einblick, which is run by the former editor of the magazine Wirtschaftswoche. He used to be very respectable. Sometimes he is still invited on news shows, but Sunday morning, there's actually just one news show that sometimes still has him on, and it is broadcast on Sunday morning. Hardly anybody watches it. And they also mention Epoch Times, the exiled Chinese newspaper that is hardly some dubious news outlet. Everybody knows Epoch Times. It is a quality newspaper. Then there is Journalistenwatch, which indeed, the name says it already. It was planned as a private blog. he did not expect it to rise to prominence in the manner that it did. The URL is horrible. That name is unspeakable. Journalist watch. And the quality, the sheer quality of it made it very very popular. Then there's Anonymous News and Russia Today, which are Russian enterprises. They are actually Kremlin funded. That's quite interesting, actually, that the Russians put out communist propaganda in America, and they do actually have conservative news here in Europe, or at least here in the German-speaking sphere. And it is probably just to confuse everybody. Of course, then the foreign news section, the international news part of their reporting is always in favor of Russia. It is far less popular than it used to be. Of course, where it is quality stuff, people quote it, but it does not influence the debate as it used to be, and they have already shrunk a lot over the last years because it didn't have the effect. People take the good stuff, the inland reporting, the conservative view on the migration crisis and so on, but people are less likely to believe them when it comes to Ukraine or Syria and so on and so on. Then they ask a random activist about the spillover effect from social media to the traditional outlets. And she's quoted as saying, in the worst case, this leads to a click-driven journalism that does not act on what's important, but what's emotionalizing. I mean, this is quite interesting from the left. After we have this Greta Thunberg march every single Friday, not because Greta Thunberg is a scientist and not because she is more capable of putting out a cohesive argument than an actual scientist, but because they want to play on emotions and only on emotions. So it is so, I don't know, this lack of self awareness on the left is mind blowing. Even if the topics are eingeordnet and commented, they are still set and get the attention. Eingeordnet, I have to explain. This is still her quote. Is a German word that journalists always use to explain the value of their work. This is a bit strange because we all don't want just objective information. If we are not computers, if you really want to go through tables of data and so on, you can have it. You would not go to any news site, not to any blog, if that were really what you want. And Google basically delivers everything that you wish. We want people to say this is good and this is bad and this is why. And the information stands in a context. It stands. It tells you something about the actors involved, and it tells you something about the ideology and so on. But journalists explain that einordnen, or giving some opinion, is their job, and at the same time, and this is the double thing that you have to learn when you are here in this country, they also claim that they are not giving opinions. Of course they do. She hates it that we speak about the topics that we care about. The media has decided that the entire migration crisis, for example, is not an issue, that we are wussies, and that climate change is everything that we should talk about instead. And we don't do them the favor. We want to talk about what is relevant to us, which is most likely to have an impact on our lives, and climate change most likely does not have an impact on our lives. The quote goes on as, in particular, Twitter is of great importance, although many people in Germany did not use the platform, according to this lady Ingrid Brodnik. So, I mean, this is then an indirect quote. First it was the direct quote, but then it continued to be an indirect one. It is true that Twitter is not used in Germany, and likewise Facebook is hardly used, and this is because of our aging population. Most people are not internet savvy, and they are on TV, and we don't have Fox News. So what people are getting is basically the CNN, MSNBC, ABC lettuce soup dish. That's what most Germans get because they are elderly and they do not know how to use Google or better DuckDuckGo, Quant, and so on. I could give you a list of search engines that you should prefer to Google. They continue speaking about Journalistenwatch, which is the news site which started as a private blog by a former mainstream media journalist, and then it became ever more popular, still had that horrible name, and has become more professional. It's now actually in the hands of somebody else, and this is how they describe it. The portal gives itself a media critical appearance, but spreads reports that are supposed to evoke a mood against Islam, migrants, journalists, and the government. Mood against the government. For example, the headlines and phrases are deliberately biased. The site also supports the radical right-wing generation identity and links to their videos. Yes, generation identity is called radically right-wing. Thorsten Beek is introduced. He is a guy who works for Spiegel, and quite interestingly, they call his work collaboration with social media. You would expect that social media does not cooperate with one news site or the other to favor them, but obviously they do, and Spiegel does have a man whose responsibility it is to ring up Facebook, Twitter, and so on, to have perfect control over what is being said in Germany. It's crazy. In a conversation with NDR and WDR, Thorsten Beek criticizes social media for using the sheer number of interactions as a criterion for relevance, rewarding them with the most lurid contributions possible. In his view, relevance arises via the meta level, the classification, the Einordnung, as I mentioned, the opinion, the deepening or the research. Now, he does not explain any of this. I have already explained this classification or Einordnung. And by the way, you can actually break up this word for yourself. It just means that there's order in it, Einordnung, and it puts the information into an order. That's, giving them some spin, some opinion. Explains why it matters. Explain why it matters to something that this or that group wants. And this is also basically what an opinion is. You explain why something is good, why it matters, for whom. This is an opinion. And the other stuff is just fluff. I mean, the meta level of a news. The deepening, I don't even know what that means, the deepening. Vertiefung in German, probably the same as then the following item, research. In German, we very often use enumerations and then have multiple items that actually use the same thing. It is the weirdest stuff, but I see it a lot. So he claims that relevance of a news item is created by giving further research. Anyway, it goes on with, therefore, Spiegel Online often refrains from reporting on topics, even if they would bring in many clicks, because the topics are not relevant. This is Tagesschau about Spiegel. Now, as a public broadcaster, they are actually obliged not to give, not to make an advertisement to any product. I'm not against them making ads on their own, but it is quite interesting because the drive that started this was actually this anti-capitalism stuff. They don't want, lobbies and corporations to have too much influence, and they don't want shows to say buy this, don't buy that. And very often on a German TV show, you will see people describing the product or service that can be used for something. If somebody gives a tip how to clean your shower or whatever, he must not say the name of the product, because that would be advertising, and the public broadcasters are actually saying they are prohibited from allowing people to give advertising during their shows. This is, of course, not what's happening anyway when it comes to art, for example. When there is a new book out, and of course, all artists that come in that come up on the public space in Germany are left-wing propagandists. So they slap some movie or some book or some theater play into your face and say, buy, go watch. This is the most normal thing in the world. But in their own words and legally, they are actually breaking the law. And by this, standard, they're also breaking the law when they say Spiegel, has many options to generate more revenues, but for the quality of their product, which you should buy, they omit that to present you the most actually relevant meta level relevant news items. The same news Tagesschau had a second article about the same report, and there they write, the democratic parties are losing control over the debate on the web. Now, this is a propaganda technique that we see for about 5 years now. The AfD is, I think, 6 years old also, and after a year also, they just said the democratic parties. That's basically everybody, including the party that ran the communist dictatorship in East Germany, which still exists today, Das Linke, is democratic. Yes, the party that locked up dissidents, shot them in the back when people tried to flee, they are the democratic parties. And AfD were the only party that is not democratic. And they never explain it. It's, as I said, Marxists, they just throw out some accusations and they do not explain why suddenly one group is accused of something and not another group, and what are the details of the accusations. They just throw out something on the wall and see what sticks, mudslinging. That's what they do. And in this report they wrote, the analysts found that 47% of the political discussions had a thematic connection to the AfD and right-wing issues, even though the group of right-wing supporters accounts for only around 10% of users. So right-wing topics are more interesting than left-wing topics, and that's why people who are on the internet talk more about these topics. And quite frankly, when I go online and check the news, I scroll and scroll and scroll, and I go through 5 media outlets at one time to gather what I would talk about next. Because most of it, what the left wants to talk about, is incredibly boring. I don't want to read stories about transsexuals all day long, because I don't know how that is relevant to anybody. I think quite seriously, I think transsexual issues are not even relevant for transsexual people. It continues with in the messages which explicitly address German parties. The AfD was named in about 1/3 of the cases. That's quite strange, isn't it? The AfD is the 3rd largest party in parliament, and the second the opposition leader. That's what we call the party that is the biggest party but does not have ministerial roles, that have that run no ministries on the federal level. So it is the biggest party that does not run ministries, and it is the 3rd largest party in total. And they somehow expect that, speaking about all parties, people would not mention AfD. How is it surprising? I'm actually surprised that the number is so low as it is. SPD Speaker of the party, that's scheinbar das Generalsekretär, Lars Klingbeil, said in an interview with NDR and WDR, it is always easier for populists to get online. We have a lot of black and white discussions there, a pure pro or a pure contra. The AfD benefits from this. Now, outside the fan, nobody's really using the word populist, and if you watch BBC, you know that in Europe we just happen to demonize that word. It doesn't really mean anything. I don't know who uses it, but what they use it for is conservatives. They use it to smear conservatives, but when they define populism, they just define it as dumb. A populist is somebody who is hateful, simplifies things that should actually be explained in more detail, sees everything just as black and white. I mean, it's hilarious that people who would attack conservatives and smear everybody as black and devilish and so on, would dare to point the fingers on them and accuse them to be all black and white. The lack of self-awareness is always baffling. And then it goes on how the topic setting works, shows an example from December 2018. The federal AfD spokesman Jörg Meuthen shared a contribution, or shared a post about the Swiss chocolate brand Toblerone as being halal. Halal means being compatible with Muslim dietary laws, and had been certified as halal. Meuthen criticizes the manufacturer for it immediately thereafter. This accusation spreads on Twitter, and just a little later, media such as the FATS, the BR, which is a public broadcaster, and even CNN published articles and referred to Meuthen. Yes, this is because it is interesting, because when you claim that Muslims are a persecuted, downtrodden minority in Germany or in the West, it is a bit strange when the whole universe bows to them to accommodate them. I personally have absolutely nothing against certificates for halal. Um, I have not lived in the United States so far, but I doubt that there are many products that say kosher, kosher, kosher. And the difference really between Jews and Muslims is that the former know actually the word Tupperware. If you want to abide to religious rules, it is because you want to show something to yourself, to your community, or to the Lord Himself, that you sacrifice something for your religion. You stick to these rules, you know, because it is a bit difficult. And that's why it is interesting. Now I go through a third article by NDR. NDR is also belongs to the same um, broadcaster that shows a tagesschau. It belongs to ARD. ARD is as well the name of the main channel of the agency, as well as the name of the agency. And the largest subdivision of ARD is the northern part, NDR. It is supposedly for the northern region, but it can be also received on in southern regions. And it also has this some messages are put out there, some of which deliberately spread fake news. So they have this very same propaganda techniques, and this is why I went through with you all these different articles, to see that they repeat the same talking points again and again and again to ram down into people's heads certain messages. I'm not making this up. It is just they want people to learn things by repetition. And they have another example of how social media spills over into traditional mainstream media. Mohammed is the most popular first name for newborns in Germany. This was a small note in the online presence of the tabloid Bild. This side note picked up by the Alternative for Germany, AfD, and the reactions were intense and numerous. Now, why was this more interesting than Greta Thunberg? It is more interesting because you guys claim all the time that we are conspiracy theorists when we say that in 2 or 3 generations there will hardly be any Germans anymore, and that Islam is taking root in this country. This is relevant for younger people. I will still live in 40 years, maybe, and by that, it is most certain that Germany will be by and large a Muslim country. By now, 1/4 of Germans are of foreign descent, and in 40 years, I mean, this is a very cautious prediction. Muslims might be a majority. I mean, by the most cautious predictions, this is the case. If we stop all immigration right now and just watch the birth rates and so on, in 40 years we will be a Muslim country, and I will still live there. And as long as anti-Semitism, for example, or homophobia and misogyny and so on and so on and so on is always just mentioned a bit, and integration is all about learning the language and work for McDonald's, and these hard topics are never being discussed in details. They are always just some cocktail party chatter. As long as this is the case, people have all rights to be nervous about this. And if you claim that everybody who wants to speak about this development is a conspiracy theorist, the reality of a majority of babies having a Muslim name contradicts you. what this little message shows is that you continuously lie to us. It shows that you are human garbage. That is what it shows. And that is why it is more interesting than some gender bending blah 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 stuff. That was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.